Salutations, and welcome to another installment of our full analyses of the Halo Beta series, where I go in-depth on various pre-release builds of Halo games. This time, to commemorate the recent announcement that Halo Reach is coming to the Master Chief Collection, as well as the incoming PC port, we'll be covering the Halo Reach multiplayer beta. This is the public test that was conducted from May 3rd to May 20th in the year 2010. Halo Reach introduced a whole suite of new gameplay mechanics, such as armor abilities, assassinations, playable elites using different stats, and much more. Today, we'll be deeply analyzing the public beta build of Halo Reach.
10 seconds remaining. Hill control.
Once the public testing phase for the Halo Reach beta concluded on May 20, 2010, access to the build had been closed off for good. Or at least that was the intended result. While modders were able to play the beta long after May 20, 2010, Lord Zed's modified executable, which was released years later, allowed modders to really dive into this build to truly see how it differentiates itself from the retail product. To begin our dive into the beta, we'll start with the main menu. Originally, the only options that could have been selected during the time of the beta's testing phase were matchmaking and theater mode. However, once again thanks to Lord Zed's modified executable, the rest of the beta's hidden selections have been revealed to us. All throughout this menu there's music tracks that are exclusive to this build. Here's my personal favorite. I'll leave a link in the description to Halo Awesome C19's channel, which has each of the tracks uploaded there. As for the main menu options themselves, we'll start with the campaign menu. Unfortunately, there are no campaign levels in this multiplayer only beta, so we can't access any single player content. We can, however, look at the campaign menu options. As I just said, since there's no single player map files, there will be nothing in the missions tab. When opening up the skulls category, we're given a Halo 3-like skull selection page, with the visuals being placeholder. There are no skulls to select, but we can at least set up campaign scoring for our non-existent story mode session. What I believe to be the most notable aspect of this page is the difficulty selection screen. When selecting each difficulty, unused sword clanging sounds will play, with each subsequent sound becoming fiercer depending on how hard the player would like the campaign to be. Lastly, there's the campaign scoring screen, which remains mostly the same in the final game. It's funny how there's a menu option specifically dedicated to campaign scoring when the provided Halo 3-like placeholder screen for skulls had a widget for scoring right above where the skulls would be. The theater menu is pretty much the same as retail's, but with the big difference being that two local profiles cannot be signed in at the same time when attempting to watch theater mode clips, whereas this is possible in the final game. The custom games, forge, and firefight menus visually look like their final counterparts, but the respective game type settings menus are incomplete with text strings missing throughout. When attempting to select a game type in the custom games menu, nothing will pop up, and the resulting match will start with just a blank game type that won't spawn anything game type related. No loadouts, no objectives, and the score won't even keep track of kills. This may all seem grim, but Lord Zed is a wizard, and because he's a wizard, he made an application that posts Halo Reach beta game types to the main menu, and we can play them this way. Firefight isn't necessarily what you think it is. Well, sorta. During the Halo Reach beta session all those years ago, there was a game type called Network Test 1. While it was advertised as a new multiplayer game type called Generator Defense, where Spartans have to defend 3 generators against elite attackers, its main purpose was to test what would become Firefight's netcode, and Generator Defense would become an exclusive game mode for Firefight and not for multiplayer. My point is, this technically isn't a Firefight lobby, but at the same time, it is. Then there's Forge. In the Reach beta, it's in an extremely incomplete state. When attempting to enter the editor mode, the game will crash and the user is forced to go back to the dashboard. This is caused by the monitor's HUD being bugged in a way that makes the game crash when attempting to transform into the monitor. By nullifying the monitor's HUD, we're able to enter editor mode without the game crashing. Unfortunately, the only action that we can perform in this Forge mode is picking up and deleting weapons and vehicles. Nothing else can be picked up. Nothing can be spawned in from the object menu since it doesn't exist, and map variants can't be created. There is one major quirk about this game's Forge mode, however. When picking up a weapon or vehicle, your monitor enters into a no-clip mode, which allows the characters to phase through walls and other map boundaries. This lets us get into a certain part of Sword Base, but I like to save this point for later in the video. The bipeds used for the Spartans and Elites are positioned differently than their final counterparts. Also in the beta, the Spartans hold assault rifles while the Elites hold plasma repeaters. In the final game, this was changed to the DMR and needle rifle respectively. Before we move on to gameplay, the last main menu area is the start menu, where the player has access to armor customization, controller settings, etc. In the beta, the player can only customize a Spartan helmet, shoulder, and chest armor, while the wrist, utility, visor color, knee guards, armor effect, and firefight voices are new options in retail. In final, the player can also choose their preferred elite variant, whereas the minor is the only available option in the beta, and that's whenever a game type is selected with elite support. There are only 3 helmets in this build that can be accessed by normal means: the Mark 5B, the CQC, and the military police. The main takeaway from here is that each helmet in this build has different attachment options compared to their final counterparts. The Mark 5B has an attachment called the CNM, which is the command network module that's also part of the HUL attachment. In the final game, the CNM and the HUL are just one combined attachment and is designated the UA attachment, where it is joined with the UA-HUL side attachment. The CQC helmet in the beta has the UA and HUL as separate attachments. In retail, the CQC has access to a new hazmat attachment named the CBRN, followed by its own variation of the UA-HUL. The military police has access to its own variation of the CNM, followed by an attachment called the HESAE. In the final build, the military police gets its own CBRN, which is conjoined with an attachment called the HURS, followed by the command network module, which is also joined with the HURS. The only available shoulder pads in the beta are the default, the scout, the EOD, the FJ Para, and the Mark 5B. Meanwhile, the only chest armors available are the default, the MP base security, the assault scout, and the assault CQC. In retail, most of the shoulders and chest pieces in the beta have been renamed, and some of the chests even received a visual change. The scout shoulder is now the CQC, the FJ Para is now the UA multi-threat, the EOD is now the Gungnir, and the Mark 5B takes over the role of FJ Para. For the chest armor, the MP base security is now the UA base security and has a belt made of grenade launcher ammo. The assault scout is now the multi-threat Mjolnir Mark 5B and also received a grenade belt, and the assault CQC is now the assault commando. The customizable emblems are essentially the same as they are in the retail, but the main functional difference is that they don't appear on the player's armor in the beta, but they do show up in the retail product. A core aspect to any Halo game is its weapon sandbox, and Halo Reach wasn't afraid to explore or try new things after the original trilogy. In the Halo Reach beta, every weapon in this game has vertical recoil, whether it was an assault rifle, a sniper rifle, or even a Plaza Pistol. This functionality was removed from the beta in the retail product, as it would have only added another layer of randomness to Reach's combat model. The beta weapons also lacked initial pickup animations. In the final game, every weapon the player picks up off the ground will play an exclusive animation only for that specific action. There are 5 weapons in this build that are missing that make an appearance in the final game, and that includes the target locator, the plasma rifle, the concussion rifle, the spiker, and the fuel rod gun. To start our coverage on the beta weapons, we'll begin with the assault rifle. Players who have participated in the Reach beta when it was live distinctly remember the assault rifle being underpowered in the beta, and it certainly was. In the beta, each bullet does 5.5 points of damage. This results in the Spartan breaking the shields in 13 shots, while killing an 8 when unshielded, totaling a 21 shot kill. Against elites, the shields break in 15 shots and require another 9 rounds to kill when unshielded, totaling 24 shots. That's 75% of the magazine needed to kill an elite, and you have to be dead on with each shot. In the final game, the AR has been buffed to dish out a damage roll between 5.834 and 6.788 per shot. It can break a Spartan's shields in 11 to 12 shots, followed by either 8 more rounds to kill if it took 11 shots to break the shield, or 7 shots if it took 12. Both instances amount to a 19 shot kill against a Spartan. Against elites, the AR breaks the shields in 13 shots, that kills with 8 with unshielded, a 21 shot kill. It may not seem like that much of a buff, but believe me, it adds up to something, and you'll understand when I go over the plasma repeater later. In the beta, the AR can carry up to 352 spare rounds, totaling 384 when including the loaded magazine, just like in Halo 3. However, this was shortened by 2 magazines in the final build, with the player only being able to carry up to 288 spare rounds, which totals up to 320 rounds total when including the loaded magazine. The third-person Spartan melee animations for the assault rifle are different than how they are in the final build. One of the animations for the Spartan has it sweeping the weapon across the chest towards the lower left side of the body, and this will be seen on a lot of rifle-type weapons in this build as it's the global rifle melee animation. This next one is exclusive to the AR and the DMR, and also has a first-person animation that goes unused in the final game. This animation has the user rotate the weapon 90 degrees to the left to hit the enemy with the butt on the rifle, then quickly flips it back up to the standard position. In the final game, this animation was replaced with a simpler animation revolving the use of the butt of the weapon without flipping the weapon back up. The third-person global Spartan melee animation for the rifles in the final game is also different than the beta, where the user sweeps the weapon across the chest towards the upper left part of the torso. Continuing on with the UNSC weaponry is the Magnum. As said earlier, every weapon in the game has vertical recoil, but the Magnum was hit the hardest by it, and the vertical recoil on this weapon is absolutely massive. The weapon also has a faster fire rate in the beta, with a fire recovery time of 0.17 seconds. In the final game, the large amount of vertical recoil is gone, and the Magnum has a slightly slower rate of fire, with a fire recovery time of 0.19 seconds. If you're confused by what I mean by fire recovery time, it's the amount of time the user of the weapon has to wait in between each trigger pull before they can fire again. If you played other shooters like Call of Duty, where some of the pistols can fire as fast as you can pull a trigger, it is due to a very low fire recovery time. Next up is a DMR. The numbers plate uses a sage green coloring with a different font than the one used in the final game. It can hold 12 rounds per magazine, along with the ability to hold up to 48 spare rounds, which amounts to 60 total when factoring in the loaded magazine. In retail, the number plate changes to a lighter blue color and uses a newer font, and the magazine size has been increased to 15 rounds, and the amount of ammo that can be carried has been increased to 60 spare rounds, and 75 total when factoring in the magazine. In tip of the spear, the player loadout consists of a grenade launcher and a DMR, and this DMR starts off with 3 less rounds in the magazine, followed by 48 spare rounds. This appears to have been an oversight, and the developers forgot to update the player starting profile in the scenario tag to accommodate for the DMR ammo capacity changes. Now we move on to the grenade launcher. The display screen that shows how far the grenades are from the user uses a much dimmer gray coloring compared to the final game's more vibrant blue. The EMP explosion from the tethered grenades, or the kinds that are fired when the player holds down the trigger, dishes out 70 points of EMP damage, whereas this was buffed to 100 points in the final game. The melee animations for the grenade launcher also differ from what they become in the final game. In the beta, there's only one animation used at all, and the third-person variant goes unused in the final game. Meanwhile, the grenade launcher in the retail build has a second melee animation. The first one that replaced the animation from the beta uses the new global rifle animation, while the new animation has a Spartan sweeping the grenade launcher over its shoulder. The rocket launcher uses a different reticle in the beta, which has the crosshairs used for tracking the air vehicles sitting idle in the middle of the whole reticle. In the final game, it has been replaced with a more traditional rocket launcher reticle as seen in older Halo games. Elites in third person hold the grip awkwardly in this build, as if they're barely holding onto the attachment. This was corrected in retail. When targeting aircraft, there are no sound effects that are played when the rocket launcher locks onto a target. The shotgun has a difference that almost everyone who has played the Reach beta will immediately recognize. The rear iron sights use blue lights on the beta shotgun, while the color was changed to red in the final game. Also, the reload animation for the elites are a bit bugged at the end of the animation, where it gets a little jittery. Here's the Spartans animations for comparison, and naturally this was corrected in retail. The sniper rifle's differences are extremely subtle. The rate of fire is slightly faster in the beta, with a fire recovery time of 0.7 seconds. In the final game, it's now set to 0.75 seconds. The text string that says what zoom level the sniper rifle is using is lying to us. In the beta, the 5x zoom level is actually a 4x according to assembly, and the 10x zoom is really just a 9x magnification. In the final game, the 10x magnification was corrected to actually being 10x, but the 5x zoom still strangely uses a 4x magnification. Here I'm actively poking the zoom level of each magnification, switching between 4x and 5x in the first zoom level, followed by 9x and 10x in the second zoom level to not only show just how borderline unnoticeable this change was, but to show the world how a 5x zoom magnification on the Reach sniper rifle will look like if it was implemented correctly. Lastly, when unzoomed, the scope has a text string that says Noble 6 displayed on the beta sniper rifle. This was removed from the retail counterpart. The Spartan laser has two differences in the beta. The lights that are illuminated on the top part of the weapon are blue in color, and the targets that are shown in the thermal display screen appear as outlined figures. In the final game, the above lights are now orange in color, and the targets shown on the screen are opaque and more clearly visible. The last UNSC weapon is the frag grenade. This iteration of Halo Reach's frag is infamously known by the Halo community to be grossly overpowered, and it certainly was. In the beta, the frag grenade dished out 90 points of damage per explosion, as an effective radius of 0.6 world units. While in the final game, the explosion damage was nerfed to 80 points, and the effective radius was reduced to 0.54 world units. Moving on to the Covenant arsenal, our first weapon is the Plaza Pistol. In the beta, each regular bolt dishes out 12 points of damage. It could break a Spartan's shield in 6 shots, and kills with 4 when unshielded, totaling a 10-shot kill. Against elites, it breaks their shields in 6 shots, and kills with 5 when unshielded, totaling an 11-shot kill. In the final game, the regular bolt appears to have been buffed significantly, dishing out 16 damage per shot. Against the Spartan shields, all the weapon needs to break it are 3 shots, and requires 7 more to kill when unshielded, totaling a 10-shot kill. Against elites, it breaks their shields in 4 shots, and kills with 7 more when unshielded, totaling an 11-shot kill.
Now, hold on, Vegetable Vadam, didn't you just say that the Plaza Pistol was buffed and did more damage? Why does it take the same amount of shots to kill as a beta version?
That's an excellent question, comment section. This is due to another underlying change that the Plaza Pistol went through between builds. In the beta, the Plaza Pistol uses a damage model called Plasma Fast, which is what the Plasma Repeater uses. It's a type of plasma bolt that does more health damage than shield, much like the majority of the UNSC firearms. In the final game, the Plaza Pistol now uses the damage model called Plasma Slow. This is the more traditional damage model used for plasma-based weaponry that does more shield damage than health. The buff to the damage per shot from 12 to 16 was made to compensate for the change in damage models for the Reach Plaza Pistol. The overcharged shot for the Plaza Pistol does 400 EMP damage and has an effective range of 0.05 world units. In the final game, its damage was reduced to 200 EMP damage, but the effective radius was greatly increased to 0.2 world units, making it a much more lethal area of effect projectile. The reticle for the overcharged shot also doesn't have that small animation that plays in the final game when there's a target lock, where a smaller version of the reticle turns slightly on an angle phases into the center of the crosshair. In the beta, the entire reticle just shrinks into a much smaller size. Still on the subject of the charging mechanic of the Plaza Pistol, effects for it differ between the builds. In the beta, the charging bolt illuminates a much more defined green color, and the light that illuminates the floor is brighter and consistently lit. In the final game, however, the charging effect is still green, but has some small shades of teal blue in the mix, and the light that illuminates the floor is more sporadic and not as vibrant. Lastly, the Plaza Pistol has some melee animations that are different between the builds. In the beta, one of the animations is what I consider an older version of another one used in the retail product. This one has the user whack the pistol forward until it barely reaches the edge of the screen. In the final game, the pistol whip is extended to go off camera before returning to its normal orientation. Going back to the beta melee animation for a second, the Spartan's third person animation for this action uses the Magnum's pistol flip melee animation as a placeholder. This has been changed in the finished product to look more like what the first person animation is doing. Finally, moving away from the Plaza Pistol, we have the Plasma Repeater. The most immediately striking feature is its visuals. The heat gauge seen in the first person model is quite different to what it becomes in the final game. In fact, this heat gauge design is on the beta repeater, but on the opposite side of the weapon, and when the weapon is firing, this gauge won't display heat, or at least not in the way you'd expect it to. However, in the final game, both gauges on the weapon will properly display heat levels in the third person this time around. Speaking of heat, both Spartans and Elites won't play a third person animation when the weapon is venting excess heat, and the heat itself won't be expelled in third person either, but both will play out in the retail build. In terms of damage output, the Plaza Repeater dishes out 6.5 points of damage per bolt in the beta. It takes out a Spartan shield in 11 shots, followed up by 7 more for the unshielded kill, totaling an 18-shot kill. Against elites, it breaks the shield in 13 shots, and it kills with 7 more against an unshielded elite, totaling 20 shots. As you can see, the beta Plaza Repeater sorely outclasses the beta assault rifle. In the final game, the Plaza Repeater received the tiniest of nerfs to keep it in line with the now buffed assault rifle. It now dishes out a damage roll of 5.834 to 7 points per shot. It breaks a Spartan shield in 11 shots, followed by 7 or 8 more when unshielded, making it an 18 or 19 shot kill. Against elites, the shield breaks after 13 shots, followed by 8 more when unshielded for the kill, making it a 21 shot kill this time. Now the stats mirror the assault rifles almost exactly, but ever so slightly worse now. Next up is the Needler. The beta Needler has green lights that surround the weapon model, whereas they're illuminating a blue colored light in the final game. The Needler's red reticle range was also slightly longer in the beta, with its auto aim range of 30 world units. In the final game, this value was slightly nerfed to 26 world units. Speaking of needles, we have the Needler's cousin, the Needle Rifle. The objective lens, which is the glass on the end of the scope furthest from the stock, uses a green color in the beta, whereas the final variant has it in red. Much like the Needler, there are green lights that surround the beta Needle Rifle, which becomes a purplish blue in retail. The 3 lights in the first person model that are meant to display how much ammo has been spent on the weapon emit a reddish light sooner than it does in the final game, where it takes a much longer time to reach that color, going from orange to red the further the magazine is drained. The firing effect for the Needle Rifle is oddly using a greenish hue in the beta, which is corrected to a more pinkish color in retail. However, the biggest change that I'd like to talk about regarding the Needle Rifle, and one of the strangest forms of trivia that I've found in this build, is its ammo capacity. Here's what I have to work with in the map files, and I'll try to explain what's being said here to the best of my ability. The rounds total initial, which is set to 54 for the beta Needle Rifle, is the amount of ammo a weapon will have when it's picked up, which means that since the rounds total loaded maximum is 16, which is the magazine capacity, this means there should be 38 spare rounds when the Needle Rifle is picked up. There's a problem with this though. 54 is not divisible by 16, so this pair of numbers simply makes no sense. The rounds total reloaded, which, as the name suggests, is the amount of ammunition the next magazine is supposed to receive on a reload, is set to 18, which also makes absolutely no sense since the magazine size has been set to 16, which this value is supposed to mirror. It ultimately doesn't matter all that much in game though, since when the weapon reloads, you're still only given 16 needles in the magazine as opposed to 18. What makes this 18 value even stranger is that it's a number divisible by 54. So you'd assume that the magazine size of 16 was a mistake via oversight, and the correct rounds total loaded maximum value should have been 18. But let's look at the last 2 values that I haven't mentioned yet. The rounds total maximum and the maximum rounds held work hand in hand with each other. Rounds total maximum, as the name suggests, is the total amount of ammunition that a player can hold for the given weapon, which factors in the rounds loaded in the weapon's magazine as well as the spare rounds. In this weapon tag, it's set to 90. Meanwhile, the maximum rounds held is the maximum amount of spare ammunition that a player can hold for a weapon, and it's set to 74 here. If we subtract 74 from 90, guess what we're given? 16! It's like this weapon tag's trying to accommodate a 16 round and an 18 round magazine at the same time. Anyways, I'm going to move away from this and just get to the weapon statistics now. The Needle Rifle in the beta can carry up to 74 spare rounds with 16 needles in the magazine, totaling 90 shots in the beta. So when we dump all the Needle Rifle's ammunition and make it to the last magazine, you're left with an incomplete magazine with 10 needles, as opposed to 16. In the final game, the Needle Rifle's ammo capacity was buffed alongside the DMRs. It can now carry up to 84 spare needles, with 21 needles in the magazine, totaling 105 shots in retail. Since 84 and 105 are divisible by 21, the last magazine will be full assuming we emptied all the other mags beforehand. Finally, moving away from the Needle Rifle, the energy sword is mostly the same as it is in the final game. However, there are no sword assassinations in the beta whatsoever, and the game will just default using the regular animations. Halo Reach also introduced a new melee mechanic when it came to fighting the energy sword: parrying. This already existed exclusively for energy sword versus energy sword combat in Halo 3, but now other weapons can defend themselves from an incoming sword attack by meleeing at the exact same time as a sword attack. In the beta, the parry uses the standard melee sound effect, but in the final game, is the sword clash sound. When fighting an enemy gravity hammer user, the sword user will always win if it's at full health. However, in the final game, this matchup reversed, and the hammer user will come out on top each time. Speaking of the gravity hammer, let's talk about it next as we just discussed the sword versus hammer matchup. The beta hammer dishes out 180 points of damage and has an effective radius of 1 to 1.5 world units. Each hammer swing also doesn't produce any knockback in this build, and there's sound effects missing for the hammer swing action. In the final game, the gravity hammer dishes out 160 points of damage and has an effective radius of 0.36 to 1.2 world units. Each swing will produce some knockback for both the user and the victim, and the missing sound effects are included this time. The focus rifle is our next Covenant weapon. The beta focus rifle has a quirky first-person firing animation where there's no transition to the weapon recoiling backwards to fire the beam. It just snaps to that position immediately. This still somewhat happens in the final game, but not nearly as often, and there's some added keyframes to include said transition. The symbol on the objective lens of the focus rifle gradually lightens up with a white outline while the weapon is firing. In the final build, this symbol instead immediately turns yellow and stays that way until the weapon stops firing, where it will gradually return to its original color. The lights on the beta focus rifle have a bluish gray color, and during sustained fire, they also gradually lighten up to a white color like the symbol on the objective lens. These lights are a more defined blue color in the final focus rifle, and immediately become a yellow color just like the objective lens. Lastly, the plasma smoke that vents out of the beta version of this weapon is a red color, while it's purple in the final game. The plasma grenade uses a more faded color scheme in the beta, and it slightly clips into the ground when it spawns on the map. In the final game, the colors are much more vibrant and distinct, and it orients itself perfectly on the ground, no longer clipping through map geometry. The last weapon is the plasma launcher, and many people who have played the Reach beta will remember just how overpowered this version of the weapon truly was. In the beta, the plasma launcher immediately locks onto its target thanks to an acquire time of 0 seconds. It also only takes 2 seconds to fully charge this weapon to shoot all 4 plasma grenades. Not only that, the red reticle range on the beta plasma launcher is also insane compared to its final counterpart. Here, the plasma launcher's auto aim and magnetism range is 60 world units. In the final game, the acquire time has been raised to half a second, it takes 3 seconds to fully charge this weapon, and the red reticle range has been cut in half to 30 world units. There are references to 2 unused grenades in the beta, and these are the Spike and Firebomb grenades from Halo 3. They don't have models in this beta, but there are some leftover sound effects for each one. What's neat about the Spike grenade in particular is the fact that if I poke the grenade regeneration game type setting to my match, it's able to spawn in my grenade inventory in the 3rd slot. The Firebomb, however, does not spawn this way. When the Spike grenade is selected in my grenade inventory, if I have both a frag and plasma grenade already picked up, the icons for both of them join together in a visual mess. While playing around with the Spike grenade slot, I also discovered this text string: hold button to swap for plasma grenade. It appears that when Bungie was originally deciding on having more grenade types in Halo Reach, the player would have only been able to carry 2 types at a time, much like how you can only carry 2 weapons. This will be the end of part 1 of our full analysis of the Halo Reach beta. When we return for the second installment, we're going to cover everything else that there is to offer in this build, which includes the vehicles, loadouts, the maps, and much more, so stay tuned for part 2. If, and only if, you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and subscribe for more Halo content on this channel, and make sure to hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload a new video. Make sure to follow me on Twitch, my Twitter, and join my Discord server as well. This is the Vengeful Vadam, and I'll see you on the great journey.